Ever felt overwhelmed by API integration? Well, you're not alone. Whether it's get, post, put, or delete, handling APIs can be confusing, but not anymore. In this video, I'll clear all the confusions and show you how to use Angular's HTTP client like a pro. We'll cover making requests, handling responses, and managing errors. But this just doesn't end there. So I'll actually integrate with an API that I created in this video just to help you understand these concepts. And if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So now let's get to the code. Okay, so before we actually start up with anything, we need to generate a couple of files. So the first one is to generate our actual to-do service. So for this, you'll need this command, ng generate to-do, ng generate service, and then you say in your services folder, and then you just say to do, and this will generate this file for you. I've added like a couple of methods that we basically gonna need in there. So let's go ahead and actually start off by setting up like our actual integration. So what you need for that is to have like an HTTP, then you need to inject your HTTP client. So after actually injecting like your HTTP client, what you can then do is actually use that to use your HTTP method. So the first one is our get to-dos. So for this, I'm going to need this.http, and then I'm just going to use this get. Then in here, I just need to pass it like a string, right? So what I'm going to use is from my environments. So if I go to my actual environments folder here, you'll see that I've actually set up like the base URL to my API to this local host, and it's hosted at port 3000, right? So in here, I just need to make sure this is just coming from environments. Okay, so then this, I'm just gonna use this base URL from there and then say /to-do. Right, so this is gonna be the API for getting all my to-dos. And then underneath that, I'm just gonna use this to-do and then / and pass it the ID because that's the endpoint that I'm gonna need. So let me just write down how the endpoints are like. So if I were to just copy this for you, right? So this is how the endpoint is actually structured. This is just going to say to do / and then the actual ID here, right? So with this one up here, this is just going to be like that. Just going to comment this out, and that's awesome. Then for actual add to do, this is going to be like a post method. So we'll just ensure that we have like a return HTTP, then we're using a post method, right? What we want to do is actually then target this because this is the endpoint to our actual post. And then what we know that in our post method, we need to also pass in like data, right? So this is the data I'm going to pass in, and for that I've already created like an interface that I'm going to show you, which is this create to the interface that just consists of the actual item. So this data is the data that we're going to pass it into our body. Okay, so now for the actual delete, so the delete is almost like this one, right? The endpoint is almost the same like this gets, just that I'm just using this delete method. Okay, the update is also the same as using the post method. So instead of post, I'm going to use put. And then this also accepts like the body, which is that data. So let me show you this interface I've created. So what I need for that is actually the ID and the actual item. Okay, so those are the actual methods that I'm actually going to use, or that I'm actually going to need. So now let me just go ahead and actually create like a non-existing endpoint, right? So this method is what I'm just gonna need to use just to demonstrate like the errors. So this is just gonna be no, not allowed, I'm just putting in anything because this endpoint doesn't exist. So I just want to show you if I like get like an HTTP like error status code like 404 or something like that, and how to handle that. Okay, so now that I've got these methods, what I'll then need to also like generate is my component, generate a component. So in my pages folder, I want to create this to do. Awesome. Okay, now I can just go ahead and actually serve my application. Now that it's actually serving, what I would want to do is actually now set up a path for my actual to-dos. So this is just going to be going to the to-do, and then this is going to render the to-do component. I'm going to save this, ensure that here where the app starts off, I'm just going to redirect to the to-dos, right? Okay, awesome. So that's basically what we're going to have right there. And now I can actually go to my actual to-do. I'm gonna actually go to my actual to-dos and start off by creating like the actual skeleton. Okay, or how the app is gonna look like, well, the HTML for that, right? So yeah, so now that we actually now have like the actual skeleton for this, let's go ahead and actually like do a couple of like integrations, right? So what we're gonna need is I wanna implement on init, and then I need to make sure that this actually uh, has this function, which is this ng-init, right? So what I wanna do is I wanna say initialize data. Um, so for this initialized data, I've got a like specific reason why I'm putting this in this method, and you'll see what I actually mean, right? So in here, I just need to make sure that I actually inject this to-do service. So this is gonna be from this to-do service, and then yeah, so you might be getting like an error maybe somewhere somehow. If let's just do this, something of this sort, and actually see my actual consoles, right? So you might be facing like an issue, right? Like telling you something along the lines of uh, there's a null provider or something like that, right? So the reason you might be getting that is because here in your actual apps config, you just need to make sure that you provide this HTTP client, because if you don't, you'll get this error. Okay, awesome. So now that I've had it back in, now I'm just gonna go ahead and actually state this to-do service that gets all my to-dos, right? I just need to make sure that I actually now subscribe to it, right? Then in there, I then need to have this next. I'm gonna have like the actual results, and for now I'm just gonna console log what I have in there. And then on init, I just wanna call this function, which is this initialize data. Okay, so this will go ahead to my actual API and actually try to get all my to-do items. Okay, that's fine. Seeing that that's all good, I want to also show you how to go about like adding some error handling, right? So we also have this error, right? We also have this error, and then in here I'm just gonna just console error, then just have an error. And then if this throws like an HTTP error, then this will come in this section. So there was a reason why I actually now, let me just copy this, put it in here, and then just use this function, right? Because this endpoint that I'm using here doesn't exist. And then just say this is the error. Okay, once we run that, you'll see that we're getting like a 404, and then it's actually specifying that this is the error and just console logging that error. So that's how you actually handle your actual errors, right? So now that we've got all our to-dos, maybe the next thing we'd want to add in there is if I go in here, because I know we're going to be actually rendering our actual to-dos. So what I would want to do is in here run on ng4, and then this has to be to-dos, right? So what I need for that is actually to say maybe list of to-dos, right? This is going to be my actual to-do service, which is going to be an array of to-dos. So in here I've got my ID, right? In this interface, my ID, item, created date, and updated date. So those are the stuff that I need. So now to actually initialize that, I'll just need to make sure that those to-dos equal to that, and then this has to say as maybe to do, right? So that I can actually remove that error. So now what would happen is, now that I've actually had it in my actual list of to-dos, how I can then dynamically like render all these to-dos down here is to come in here and actually say for each of my list of to-dos, then inside this block I want to render this. Okay, so now that you're actually seeing something in there, but obviously we want to show, right, the actual value in here. So for that, what I can like necessarily do is either that I have like in the value, I have run this item dot item. Well, let me just say this is a to do, so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So now you'll see that it's actually adding this, right? So now I would want to run an actual add to do, right? For this, I would need to actually have here and say this is a new to do, right? Which this is going to be a string, and this will actually now equal to an empty string, right? So I'm then going to use this two-way binding. So this would be ng model, right? Then this goes into these brackets, and then this is a new to do, right? I'm getting like an error. This is because in here I don't have like a forms module. So once I've actually added this forms modules, that should remove that error. So now if I say add potato, right? Okay, if I hit this add button, obviously it's not going to do anything, because in here I need to have like a click event, and in this click event I need to have like a handle add to do, which then also needs to be integrated. Okay, so now that I've had this method, it's going to complain because I don't have this method implemented. So now in here, all we know that is we want to pass in like a function. So here I'm going to run, this is a to-do service. So this is C, that's to-do service. Okay, so this dot to-do service, and then I want to run this add to-do. So now I can just create this data, which is coming from create to-do. And in here we know that we actually expect an item. So this item is then going to come from this new to do. Okay, and then I just need to pass in this in here. Then I can just go ahead and actually copy all of these like that. Okay, okay, so now that we've actually, okay, we know that this is going to get the data, pass it in here, add a to do, but then we're going to encounter like an issue, right? Because what's going to happen is this. Let me show you something, right? So say now I add potato, right? Say I add this to do, we added that, but this is not showing down here, right? But if I reload this, you'll actually see that now it's showing. So what I need to do is that after actually adding a to-do, I would like to actually get all my list of to-dos, right? So run this initialize, which is going to get all my to-dos again from my actual list from my API, and then just render that. So now if I now say I want to also add bread, hit this add, that's then gonna add this item in there. So that's actually awesome, and the UI is not bad at all. It actually I like it. Okay, so now I'm gonna have like a handle delete to do, and with this handle delete to do, we know that we want to have like an ID in here because we need to pass in this ID, and that ID is going to be used in our actual endpoint that we're going to call to actually delete our actual to do. Okay, so what's going to happen, right? So now that we know, we can actually now actually copy this and then run this to do. I know copying and pasting code is not quite good, but I know a lot of people do it these days, especially with these AIs that are there. So okay, now we've got this handle delete to do. This is gonna go to my actual to do service, delete a to do, and then I'll have to pass it this ID in here, right? So now this ID is gonna go ahead and actually to do delete that to do, and then I also need to call that initialize again. I said initialize date, not data. So let me just, you see, that's the downfall of actually, yeah, doing the wrong things. Okay, so what this will actually then do is after deleting my actual to do, I'm gonna call this again, and that will get my newly updated list. Okay, so what I then want to do is with this to do delete, I mean to say, I want to call a click and then just call this function handle delete, but I need to pass in a to do dot id. So once I pass in this to-do.id, that will know that I need to pass in this ID and just call that endpoint. Okay, now if I hit delete this, you'll actually see that that's getting deleted. So if now I actually reload my application, you'll see that it will get the actual latest list of to-dos. So that's pretty cool, right? I actually like that. Now the next thing I would want to implement now is my actual update. Okay, so we know something. We know something, right? So we can pass in this value, and we also have this two-way binding, right? So what we want to do is actually update something from our actual list of to-dos. So how I'm going to actually update that input is I'm just going to use this two-way binding and say ng model, right? Then what I want to change here is from my to-do, I want to change the item, right? So if I go ahead and save this, right, you'll see that I don't even need to pass in this value into the value because this ng model will actually handle that for me. So now I'm actually seeing this to do, but now if I change this to say potato chip, right? Let me just then go ahead and actually now say click. So in here, I'm just gonna say handle update. In this update, I wanna pass in my actual, okay, let me just do this item. So I'm gonna say handle update. In there, I wanna pass in that item. So this item that I'm actually updating is actually coming from my to do. Okay, this is actually cool. So now what I can do is actually just console log this item so I can actually show you what's going on. So just call it update in here so you can actually see that item. Okay, so if I go ahead and save, go to my actual inspect, I know it's not going to show it proper. I'm just going to try to do that a bit and increase this. Okay, so now if I say list, right, and call this update method, what you will see is, okay, wait, let me see. So this is going in here. This is passing. Oh, sorry, my bad. I needed to pass it a to do. So now if I say potato chip, actually call this update, you'll see something in this object, right? So you're seeing the ID, the item, updated and created date. Okay, which is what we actually need, but we also know that we want to set this up to actually update data, right, which is going to come from this update to do. And for this we need to pass in two things, right? So if I just say equal to, we need to pass in the ID, which is going to come from this item dot id, and the item, then item dot item. Okay, so well, let me just call this a to do, right, and then just say to do dot item, and that this should be fine. But there's also like an easier way to actually do this, because since the mapping of the to do and the update to do is almost like the same, I can just say this is equal to do, right, and then I say as updated to do, and this should actually not complain at all, right? So if now I go ahead and actually just console.log, there's only but just one downfall with this, is that if I were to now just change this up and then do that, you'll see that it's even giving me data that I don't necessarily need, but it doesn't really matter, right? So what I can then do is, then in here I can then run this to do service dot update to do, then I can pass it in this to do, right? Okay, awesome. Or I can then run this delete, I can say update dot, I think this is fine now. I don't want to remove anything. I think this is fine. I can just don't want to do that now. Let me just leave it like that, right? Okay, so what this is gonna do is on update, I'm just gonna have like this. Okay, let me just close this up. Okay, let me close this, close my actual inspect, and actually show you, right? So in here I just want to then copy this, paste it in here, because it's almost like the same thing, right? What's going to happen is when I pass in this is going to go ahead and actually pass in the stuff that it actually needs to update, call the subscribe. Once it's done, it's going to initialize the data, which is actually getting the actual latest list from my endpoint. So if I say potato chips and run this update, that actually ran the updates, even though I don't have a loader, but we know that, okay, something happened. Okay, let me see. We didn't save it, right? So let's just run potato chips. If I go ahead and save this, rerun this, yeah, you're actually seeing that it actually did update, right? So yeah, so we've ran like my actual get request. So let's see, let's go to my actual services and actually see what's going on. If I go in here, so we've added this, we've handled this error, we've run this get to do by ID. We don't necessarily need to use that. Yeah, I don't think we gonna utilize this guy. Okay, we've got this get, which is add to do, delete, we've covered that. We also covered the update to do. Okay, just for interest's sake, because our viewers might be asking why we're running away from implementing that one. Let's see, how can we actually implement this? Let me just say view data. I'm just gonna pass in a method in here, so I'm just gonna say view. So for this view, what I'm gonna do is get by ID, right? I'm just gonna say handle get item. Okay, then this is the view. Just gonna have this as a green. Okay, this is fine. Sorry, my bad. So handle get by that. So that's cool. So let's see what's going on. Okay, this is gonna complain because in there I just need to make sure that I pass in this, which is type string. Then now, okay, let's see where it's actually now complaining. Dev, okay, yeah, awesome. So now that I've got all of them, let me just close this up a bit. Okay, for my actual view, what I'm going to do is the moment I click on this view, right, um, maybe here in the bottom, I'm just going to then render this, right? So h1, just going to say h1 view data and that h1 tag, and then I'm just going to have this guy. Okay, and then in here I'm just gonna say to do item. This is gonna be from my to do item. Then I'm just gonna do this. So in here I'm just gonna have this guy. I'm gonna set this to a read only. Read only set up to true. Okay, do you wanna update this? Let's see. I think so. But now, let me not actually try to complicate stuff. Let me just remove this guy. Okay. And then let me just also remove this. So we're just going to just show that item at the bottom. So that's fine. So we're going to say this is the to-do item that we're showing. And then in here, I'm just going to have like an if statement, which says if I've got this to-do item, then render the stuff that's down here. Okay, so now that we have that, so what will happen? So the moment I click on this guy, right, nothing happens, right? And the reason for that is because I haven't actually implemented this functionality here. So I'm just gonna copy this guy. Okay, this is gonna say get to do by ID. So this is the method, this is the get to do by ID. Let me just fix that. Where is this method now? So this has to be get to do by ID. Okay, so this gets to do now. Okay, let me just do that, and then I just need to pass in this ID. Need to say get to do's by ID. Well, it's gets to do by ID. I don't know why I'm making these spelling mistakes. Okay, let me just correct this just so that it makes sense. So now if I go back here, now if I run this, click event, okay, now that's gonna give me like another issue. And the reason why I'm gonna get that issue is because in here, let's just see where this get item is getting the wrong thing. So I just need to make sure that I've got this dot to do item. Okay, so what happens? So if I click on this, let's see what happens, right? So am I getting something? So if I click on this button, that gets that to do. See what's happening. So that gets the to do. Oh, sorry, my bad. But I'm not actually initializing this as a to do. And that's all that I just need. So the moment I click on this, that will show that. Click on that. Hence you can see which this will actually show my actual view. So yeah, that's all we need for this video. So I've actually covered how to actually implement your HTTP client using Angular. If you're new to the channel and you like this content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, peace.